Good evening, everyone. We are the Factory Seconds Brass Trio based in Cleveland, Ohio, or thereabouts. And we are playing tonight for you live from Baldwin Wallace University. The Factory Seconds Trio consists of Jack Sutte on the trumpet, Jesse McCormick on horn, myself, Rick Stout, on trombone. We've been a trio for, now about 6 years now, right? 7 years. It stretches every time I think of it. Only good time, I assure you. And we are delighted to be able to present for you tonight one of the programs which we have developed in one facet of our lives as a trio. And that is, from time to time, we are called upon to go into a high school, either maybe to recruit for Baldwin Wallace University for potential music students, or just as sort of an outreach activity that we might do as part of a concert if we are in a particular town. They might, as part of our offerings, have us go try to work with some young students. So while we are maybe more familiar usually with younger audiences than that in our outreach ensemble concerts, for the high school program, we wanted to develop something very particular. So we thought for our audience with the Primavera Fund in Philadelphia, with whom we are delighted to have worked before, we thought we might particularly show some of their talented young musicians that they are able to provide support for, what it's like to develop a program that is educational in nature, which you might use in your future careers for speaking to students of your age about where you are right now. And for those of you in our wider audience who have tuned us in and are streaming, we hope you find that it's an interesting program. And I'll tell you a little bit about it before we start. This is a program that we have entitled Music Through the Ages. We have attempted to sort of weave a story through it. And the reason for that is, honestly, we've all been a part of some sort of less successful educational concerts where the concert ends up being, well, here's a piece of music, and this is a trumpet, and it has valves, and you blow in it, and something happens, and yada, yada. So we wanted to come up with something hopefully a little more polished than that, that might serve as something that's just interesting from maybe a historical perspective for a student that's less interested in music, or for the sort of serious young music student, maybe some perspective on some different styles. We've also endeavored to incorporate some new music into this show. In fact, it's the centerpiece of this. The main piece that we're going to use is a piece entitled National Anthem of the Moon, which was written by Canadian composer Norman Sherman, and which we premiered. We particularly take great joy in being able to go into a high school and by the end of this program play about 4.5 minutes or so piece of music in its entirety. And every time we've done this, really have complete silence and rapt attention on a piece of contemporary music. And we think that in itself is a valuable lesson. So am I forgetting anything about Music Through the Ages they might want to know? Okay, so normally we would each have a speaking role in this. We decided that I would just do the speaking for this tonight. So I won't even try to imitate their voices, but at various points in our script, it would either be Jack or Jesse instead of myself. So this would be Music Through the Ages as a high school audience would hear it. Then after we play this show for you, we'll take some questions. If any of you think of questions, you're welcome to use the chat function on YouTube. And Jesse has assured me that he's come up with a technologically amazing way for him to be able to relay these to us. And we'll be happy to take some questions. Trio. And to get things started, we'd like to play for you just the first few bars of the national anthem. What's wrong? Oh, were you expecting this? Well, what I didn't tell you at first was that we are going to play for you the national anthem of the moon. That's a funny title, isn't it? The composer who wrote this piece, Norman Sherman, had quite a sense of humor and imagination, but what he also had was the ability to compose music that grew out of the music that came before him, combined with the influence of the world around him. That means his music sounds pretty complicated at first, so we thought we'd take you back to an earlier time in history and in music and see how music has developed. We'll play for you some different examples of music from different times. And maybe by the time we get back to the time of Mr. Sherman, it might just make a little more sense to you. So we start in the medieval times, or the Middle Ages, a time when much of the world was not organized into countries. People lived on their farm or in their small town, and you knew only the things that were right around you. This song is about a hunting expedition on horseback. Listen for how the composer makes you feel like you're heading off into the woods, off into the unknown, by using imitation or canon. When each of us imitates what the others just played, it builds excitement. See if you can hear a rainstorm in the middle of the piece. After the medieval period of history, so right around the year 1500, began a long period in history called the Renaissance, a word that means rebirth. This was a time of more stability for people, improvements in living conditions, and a flourishing of cities. Art and music were an important part of city life as human knowledge began to be organized and shared. Just as great thinkers and artists pondered human love and emotion, so too did composers change their style, and the possibilities for harmony greatly expanded. This next piece is a song by Jacques Sutte, who lived in Europe around 1550. His music is now a lot different from the caccia we played. Now the emphasis is on the voices playing many different pitches at once, or harmony. Listen how this harmony is more complex than the earlier piece, and imagine you're at a fancy castle or maybe a town square, delighting in these new sounds with your fellow townsfolk. If someone were singing this song, what do you think the words would be about? After the Renaissance came the Baroque period. This was a time when design and art began using new techniques, making things fancier and more intricate. Furniture from the Baroque period has lots of extra detail in the woodwork, or touches like gold leaf laid in dizzying patterns. Composers from this time began writing music which wasn't necessarily to tell a story or to be played in the church, but just like the design artists and architects were doing, it was music that celebrated music itself. Pieces of music got longer and more complex. The musical technique called counterpoint was all the rage. Johann Sebastian Bach was one of the greatest composers in the history of music. He used counterpoint more skillfully and beautifully than any other composer before or since. Listen how each of the instruments in the sinfonia, or invention, is independent and beautiful on its own, but it interlocks with the other moving voices. Each note is like a single piece in a giant jigsaw puzzle. Scattered all over the table, they don't make any sense, but when fit together in just the right way, they make a beautiful picture. We are now into the 1800s. The world has changed a lot. There have been lots of discoveries and inventions. Advancements in medicine have helped people. Discovery of the world around us has led to an optimism, a belief in education and the ordering of things. This is called the classical period. In design and art, people rejected the ideas of the Baroque as being just too frilly and embraced ideas from ancient Greece like order, clarity of thought, and balance. The composers did as well, and overall form and structure became the thing that was prized above all. One thing composers started doing was celebrating this new era by having their pieces reflect the inventions and the discoveries of the time. The composer Ludwig van Beethoven wrote some of the most famous pieces of classical music to this day. The piece we will play for you next is called Music for a Mechanical Clock, and is a great example of how music can reflect the excitement of new inventions and attitudes. Not long after classicism came what we call the Romantic era. In fact, the two are so close together that sometimes it is just called the classic Romantic era. In the Romantic era, people began looking back in history to try and recapture things they thought had been lost along the way. Emotions like nostalgia began being depicted in art and music, and composers embraced music from different cultures. The Romantic era gave us some of the greatest works of music, art, and literature to this day. One of the first pieces ever written specifically for the brass trio was this romantic piece by the German composer Oscar Boehm. In this prelude, you can hear how the possibilities for emotion in music have been increased as the rules have been stretched again. Just like the industrial age advanced quickly, music grew and pushed towards the limits of what combinations of sounds were still orderly enough for people's classical ears. Romantic music isn't just about love, it's music meant to make you think about how you feel. Now we find ourselves in the 20th century. In just 50 years since Boehm, the world has seen 2 world wars and the beginning of the atomic era. Artists and composers are again trying to make works that reflect this new world of ideas. Many composers rejected the rules of the past entirely. Others adapted the classical rules to a new time. The composer Marius Flotaus lived in this tumultuous time and wrote music that tried to preserve the best aspects of the past while reflecting a spirit of revolution and optimism. Composers like these paved the way for modern songwriters to write songs that have a social message and hope for a better world. Listen to how Flotaus uses a more modern harmonic language and really lets the brass instruments display more of their potential. You'll still hear things like imitation and harmony like in the other composers, but the composer is able to be more free, not confining himself to only certain chords or to only 8-bar phrases. That brings us to the music of today and back to our national anthem of the moon. Just 30 years or so after Flotaus wrote his piece, man set foot on the moon and we were in the space era. Technology, communication, and travel took us to places that cannot have been imagined in Bach or Beethoven's time. Many composers made new rules for the music. Some followed many of the old rules, some used new technologies to write complex music. As you listen to the complete national anthem of the moon, see if you can hear some of the same aspects of earlier music. Listen for places where you hear harmony. Listen for places where you hear us imitate each other. And listen for how the composer seems to be trying to make sense out of a confusing world, even as he writes a lighthearted, humorous piece. After many bold, demonstrative statements in his piece, he chooses to end his short anthem with a soft, quiet section. It's as if he's inviting you, the listener, to pause and reflect. Where will space exploration and technology take us? Where will music go from here? Or maybe it's something else entirely, something different for each of you. That's one of the great things about music. You get to decide for yourself what it really means. And where it goes is where you, our world's next generation, decides to take it. Thank you so much. We were just saying that we missed sort of that little time in between of applause, and come to think, we missed just the applause and the people being here. So, but we're delighted to play for you nonetheless. But in addition to just being, just so different for all of us, it's also different. It's more tiring, isn't it? We're used to those little breaks. So we thought we might, we have one more piece to play for you after a bit, but we thought we might see if there were any questions. No? Or is there anything I should tell them about the trio? We're just delighted to be here. The Primavera Fund in Philadelphia has graciously hosted us there at we play at the Music Settlement, right, in Philadelphia. And it was great young students that they work with, and then we worked with some fantastic young players just last week or 2 weeks ago over the internet, of course. But we're really happy to be partnering with them again, and we're happy to share this stream with others, and hopefully people are hearing some new music that they like, maybe, or it's just different for them, and hopefully an interesting program. Jack has a question. I could take some questions from the group. Is there anything about the trio that you all have ever wanted to know and you've been too afraid to ask me before?
We could talk about that later. Why don't you tell them, as young performers having an audience, why don't you tell them about our first opportunity to perform?
Oh, yeah, well, I don't know if you could hear the question, but the question from the back of the room there was that could I tell the audience about what it was like for us to get started as a group? And now, of course, we had the benefit, we already had a day job in that we all play with the Cleveland Orchestra. In fact, of course, that's the genesis of our name, that we're all the second chair players, hence the factory seconds designation. Sort of the group of misfit toys no one wants to play with, we feel like, sniff, sniff. Anyway, so our very first concert we played, we played in a dock by Lake Erie. There wasn't a performance space. It was called Ingenuity Fest. We were, as far as I could tell, really the only music thing there. And there were, I think, 3 or 4 people in the audience. Several of them were your family. Yeah, it was not well attended, let's just say. But from humble beginnings, and no, seriously, that's for any young musicians that are trying to put together some type of a venture, some type of a group to play for people. We won't be in these masks and stuff forever. Sometimes you start with very humble beginnings, such as that. We're not, unwilling to play either for free or for in any other kind of condition, just so we could play together and play music that we felt like we were presenting well. And I think that's one of the things we've always believed in as a group, is that if we have the conviction of what we're doing, that will transmit and translate to an audience. So it's one reason we think we can go into a high school, and sometimes, if you walk in it's whatever, 8:30 or 9 in the morning, and it's whatever period by then, and kids are already on their glycemic roller coaster for the day, and who knows where they are, and where their attention span is, and to walk in and be able to sort of capture, maybe not everybody all the time, but a lot of them, I think speaks to the just the power of what we're doing and the programs that we're trying to bring. Jesse has a question. Okay, good. Okay, so about the program first, the question was, how did we choose the music for this program? The National Anthem was a piece that we believed in. We are really always interested in playing new music of either living or recently non-living composers, and he fit that bill for us, but more importantly, it sort of fit into a narrative. We wanted to think of a program, how can we make a program that tells something of a story? And so this idea of old to new came with us. And we all have also partnered with a consultant in the arts who's helped us with our speaking and our program, the flow of our programs. So we are also not too proud to ask for help from others, and some of the ideas were Megan's actually, like the Beethoven. We weren't really familiar with it and just kind of made it work as a brass trio. So I think that's another thing in finding music. You know, very little of this was written for the brass trio. And for instance, the beautiful Arcadelle chanson we played was transcribed by Jack, who's done, we had 8 or so of those chansons from 1554, and they're 3-part music, and so they work beautifully for the trio. Sometimes you have to experiment with what instruments will sort of make the music sing. So Jack likes to use the flugelhorn on that. It makes for sort of a nice, dark, blended sound with us. Similarly, for instance, we're working on some pieces right now by Scott Joplin, and we're gonna all play old instruments, cornet, baritone, that kind of thing. So we're always looking to try to come up with the right thing, so the music has to kind of fit the program. I hope that answered you in a long-winded way. The other question was, what about how do we start to play in person again? Well, we were playing in person all through the summer and pandemic, although at farther distances than this, and generally outside. This is something a little bit new for us, but we've all been recently tested, and we feel we've sort of been able to keep a small circle around us that way. And so as many of our musician colleagues in the orchestra are engaged in a testing and return to work program, we are engaged in that as well. No additional questions. Okay. Okay, usually when Jack gets that look, I know I'm in trouble if I have a microphone. Okay, so we'd like to play one more work for you. We have chosen for you a final movement of the second trio by Belgian composer Arthur Muhlmans. We have recorded both of these trios. They are at somewhere in the factory line of being produced into little things of something that you'll play on some device or other, and along with several other projects that we've been quite active in recording. We find his music to be really delightfully busy, engaging, full of life, and very witty. So this is the final movement. It has a little fugato section, so you get to hear each of us play a little solo theme. Do we have another question? Oh, Jesse says we have another question. I was about to sign off because he said I have to sign off. But I'm not going to sign off yet. So. Boy, composers young musicians should listen to, specifically brass players. Everyone, you know, I mean, we would each give you 20 composers, and not just, you know, classical composers. Yeah, I would say, you know, the greats, you know, Tchaikovsky, Mozart, you know, all of that. Duke Ellington, you know, everybody who's got us to where we are right now, whether it's, you know, in American sort of music that originated here or the European classical tradition. Do you guys have any specific, brass specific? There are a lot of, yeah, the classics in the orchestral realm are like Strauss and Mahler, Bruckner. Those are all great brass things, but you know, really any music that lights a fire under you, whether it's, you know, Mozart or Thelonious Monk, you know, really anything, brass instruments, one of the really great things is that we're involved in all of that kind of music, or most of it, or you can find a way to appropriate it or steal it or transcribe it for your instrument. How did we each decide on which instrument to play? I know our answers because we've been asked this many times in concerts. Jack ended up on the trumpet because he started out on the violin, and his dad had a trumpet upstairs, and he just started noodling around on it, as best I remember it. I think it's close enough for reality. Jesse grew up in a musical household. Both of his parents were professional brass players, bass, trombone, and horn, respectively. And he made the noble choice of the horn over the bass trombone, I think. No, bass trombone's a great instrument, too. And I play the trombone. In elementary school, where I was living, there was a little band program. My older brother was already playing a trumpet, and I kind of wanted to play the trumpet, but I think my parents were smart enough to know not to have two of those in the same house. So my friend down the street played a trombone. I thought that looked pretty good, so I said, give me a trombone. So it's about as complicated as that. Sure. We were also asked to speak a little bit about our positions here at Baldwin Wallace. As I mentioned, we're all on the faculty here for our respective instrument. The trio is quite active here at the school. We perform here quite often, really every year, multiple times, sometimes even in classrooms. We've played in music theory classrooms. We've done quite a lot of different things here. The position here has given us wonderful opportunities that way. The school here there's about 350 or so, give or take, in the conservatory, total students. And we each have a pretty thriving program. We have about 8 to 10 each in trumpet, horn, trombone here, enough to fill the ensembles that we have here of both orchestra and symphonic bands, jazz, things like that. It's an undergraduate school just outside of Cleveland, Ohio. It's close to the airport, conveniently located. We also do some interesting things just for the brass students with our brass ensemble course, which we share with our tuba professor, Ken Heinlein. We do both brass choir and brass ensemble pieces, but we also use it as sort of a gathering point, and we make it a flex time. So sometimes we sit down and play through complete orchestra repertoire sections, all the brass parts from those. Sometimes we do small ensemble chamber works. We really try to fill any aspect of where we feel like the curriculum needs a little shoring up or what they might not be getting, and try to make it very flexible for them. Well, I think that's about it for the questions. It's been absolutely a joy for us to be able to bring what we do to an audience out there. Thank you so much again to the Primavera Fund in Philadelphia. The students have just been a delight both times that we've gotten to work with them, and we hope to be able to do that again. And feel free to write us. You can track us down either on Facebook or through here at BW or at our very own website called factoryseconds.org. And I think that about sums it up. So thank you so much, and good night from Baldwin Wallace.